Have you ever wondered what it takes to successfully raise money? I have worked with hundreds of capital campaigns across dozens of industries, and I'm here to share with you proven methods for raising money in record time and at the lowest cost, while also obtaining capital at the lowest price. My name is Carl Dakin, and welcome to Motivated Money. Hello, everyone. This is Carl Dakin with Motivated Money. We're here today to talk to you as entrepreneurs about raising capital. And with me today, I have as my guest, Emiliano De Laurentiis, which his name I struggle through every time I say that because I was born in Kansas and somehow I think you have to use all long vowels in order to pronounce anybody's name. But today, we're going to hear a lot about talking with entrepreneurs, with investors, and how they communicate, and doing this in the challenge that we want the investor candidate to understand what we're telling them. If they don't get their head wrapped completely around the opportunity, if they don't understand the value of it, then we're probably not going to be successful in talking to them about making an investment. And in the motivated money approach, for some of you who may not have participated in prior sessions, the motivated money focuses on investor candidates who have an interest or a benefit that comes out of the success of your organization. That's independent of making any investment at all. So they might be a supplier who can sell you more product. It might be a customer who gets to use that product. But whatever that extra benefit is, this serves as the framework for determining that we should talk to them first about making an investment. Because with two benefits, one coming from the investment and one coming from whatever they get out of your success, they have a higher motivation. And that higher motivation serves as the foundation for everything we talk about in motivated money. And it leads to quicker capital campaigns, lower cost and time expended in the campaign, and sometimes, quite often, lowering the cost of capital or the price that we have to pay for money or whatever resource we're going after. Now, one of the tenets of motivated money is that your investor candidate has to understand what you just said. And all too often, you'll see a pitch made by an entrepreneur looking for money where they'll use a term or an acronym, or they'll talk over the head, so to speak, of the investor candidate. And all too often, that's because they're talking about themselves and not about what it is that the investor candidate wants to learn. And that puts them in a position where they lose credibility. They don't get to that emotional intensity that needs to be there to support an investment decision. So today with Emiliano, we're going to talk about this particular challenge in the context of him, his company, and the technology that he's working with today. So Emiliano, thank you for being here this morning. I really appreciate
Thank you
your
for
being
having
on
me.
with me. Yeah, at this very early hour, we're doing this kind of off schedule, not for Emiliano, but for me. But in that regard, tell me a little bit about yourself, and then tell me a little bit about Knowledge Avatars.
Thank you, Carl. Thank you for having me on your show today. Well, I've been on this journey for the last 40 years, which is the journey of making learning easier and making it more accessible and more adaptive for people. In the 80s, I developed a platform called Socrates, which allowed us to create an adaptive learning system. And that was published by Prentice Hall. We were very lucky in those days, talking about trying to convince people and convince partners. I found somebody quite by luck at the Consumer Electronics Show who was an editor at Prentice Hall and who understood immediately what it is that we were trying to accomplish. And so, they invested this quite a lot of money in helping us create 25 educational software products uh, for 5 different platforms. And this was we had published those in 1985. Um, now we got published all over the world, and and quite, and even today, sometimes I get people from India or other countries, in China, telling us that they're still using some of our products. Unfortunately, we were still at a point where we're telling people what computers were, you know, and so people didn't understand. No, they weren't those computers were not as ubiquitous as they are today, and that was a challenge. But making learning easier and adaptive has always been the goal. And so what knowledge avatars is today, what we created today is a platform where anybody can create with no code, can create a digital tutor, a tutor that answers questions, but doesn't just answer questions the way that a Siri or Alexa does. It's a tutor that also helps you learn. And so it knows it has in its programming, it has in its DNA, it understands how concepts are related to each other, so that you can ask questions like, how is this related to this other thing, or what are the prerequisites that I need to know to understand this particular concept? So it becomes a digital tutor, and we've given them faces, as you can see behind me. We've given them faces because people studies show that people relate more to a face, and so we want that to be part of the experience.
So, yeah, it's very interesting because in development of learning platforms, knowledge avatars is assisting people who are trying to teach somebody something new. And it's kind of parallels the challenge that you have when you as an entrepreneur are trying to raise capital. The person you're talking to may not have any idea, when you start the conversation, what this is about. And particularly a lot of them, when we use the motivated money approach, don't understand the full benefit of why the success of your organization is going to help them. And so you have to teach them. And here's similarly, if you have a teaching platform where the teacher is at 100,000 feet and the student's at ground level, it's not going to work so well. But more importantly, what I want to talk about today is the fact that knowledge avatars is actually entered the metaverse, this new term that is being bounced around by everybody and adopted by people, whether it applies or not. And we won't mention any names, so to speak, in that description. But the metaverse is kind of moving from the physical world to the digital world. And we have avatars, people who look like us or can be made to look like us, that we can interact with, who are sources of information. And that, as you just described, it supports the learning process, and it allows us to do a number of things, but it creates an unending list of opportunities. I can't begin to count the number of businesses and sub businesses and support businesses who may come out of that. But Emiliano, if you would, how would you describe the metaverse to everyone? And we'll talk about that in the context of how you communicate something that is sometimes very new, brand new to people, even though you've been working with it for a long, long time.
Yeah, well, there have been different versions of the metaverse over the years. Second Life is an example of it. Some may be familiar with that. Um, but let's just look at the word itself at first. So meta, we're talking about like as in the metamorphosis. So meta as in a greater than or all encompassing. So if you're doing a meta analysis, you're analyzing everything related to a particular subject, right? Or in fact, and you're analyzing the analysis itself, or the research as well. So metaverse really is as conceived as really an all-encompassing world. And so it's more than just VR. I think it manifests itself mostly in virtual reality, in the 3D world, but it's really conceived of as a space or a series of spaces within what we used to call cyberspace, on the internet. Most people don't think don't use that word anymore, but it's a world on the internet that where you can access, and that anybody can access from anywhere anywhere on Earth, and actually at some point in the near future, maybe the moon as well, because people are working on having internet on the moon as well. Um, so it will. So it is. It's a 3D world, a VR world. It certainly involves having avatars within that world, objects, uh, property. So property will be that people are already buying property on in the metaverse, sort of staking out their positions, and it's also, but it's also about augmented reality. So augmented reality will have a play in that. So you'll be bringing in a little bit of the real world within the metaverse, or a little bit of the metaverse within the real world as we navigate our streets, for example. And the metaverse will show us with augmented reality what a particular store, what their specials may be, and while wearing probably some augmented reality goggles, and or eventually contact lenses that allow us to overlay the artificial world with the real world. And of course, talking to our knowledge avatars. Our knowledge avatars will be, will be in the metaverse as well, working around perhaps, and interacting with people and helping them with their particular expertise.
Yeah,
And
so
remember, just one last thing. I just want to say that it's also our our idea, our concept of knowledge avatars is that knowledge avatar is a teaching assistant. So they are there to help teachers and become better teachers, hopefully.
right, right. So this is the point I was trying to make. I was trying to count the number of terms that a lot of people may not know right now, but are they're going to have to learn it in the next few years, from augmented reality, virtual reality, an avatar, all these different things. And um, um, this then presents the challenge. If I'm talking to someone who's never heard of the metaverse, doesn't know what an avatar is, hasn't jumped into SimCity or Second Life or any of the online things that are out there. And there's some brand new products. There's some really great stuff that came up during COVID that was kind of an alternative to Zoom, which is what we're using at the moment for purposes of this episode of the Motivated Money. But they offer, as you put it, you could go one step beyond the limitations of the physical world. I can use an avatar, which is a digital cartoon of myself, and I can make myself younger, or I can grow hair, which would be really cool for me. Um, and a lot of people use that for fun purposes, but everything then has to be translated. And my experience working for 40 years in raising capital, I quite often work with high tech companies who have come up with something new under the sun, and I have to somehow uh, put these into words and put them or demonstrate it, or do something in order to explain to an investor candidate what I'm talking about. So at this point, Emiliano, what have you found that works best for you taking all this new technology, this new way of looking at how you do business, or how you teach somebody about something, and how do you communicate that to someone so that they get it quicker, faster?
Sure. Yeah, it's always a challenge, especially when you're dealing with concepts that are at the cutting edge of technology, cutting edge of innovation. Certainly, a picture is worth 1,000 words, they say, and demonstrating and doing, uh, really helps a lot. I in the past I've spent years uh, chasing money, and where most of the time I spent chasing the money rather than developing the product. This time around, this is my third company, and this time around, I started the Knowledge Avatar 7 years ago, but I spend most of my time. I try to balance it out between for developing a market for our product, but also developing products and improving the product as we hear more from our users and how we hear it from the public. So that is where um, I, so my focus now is, I'd say 50-50 perhaps, or even maybe 75% development and 25% raising money. because I feel that, and looking for ways to partner with people to raise that money rather than and finding partners who will fund us or who will work with us in order to, and using that money to improve the product. So for example,
Well,
we
no,
have
but let's stop with that, Emiliano, because you and I are working together, and I think I just fell into the definition of the person you're working with. But again, this is part of the motivated money approach is that if you're working with stakeholders, people who stand to benefit from the success of your organization without making an investment, they quite often already have some familiarity with what a person may be talking about. They may actually have been in the industry longer than you have. They may be a supplier vendor of something that you're incorporating in your product or service. And that means that the gap between what you know and what they don't know is much, much smaller, if any at all. And so, yeah, when you and I started talking about putting together the entrepreneur coach, and for those of you who want to try that out, just go to http entrepreneurcoach.pro. We've developed an AI to teach people about entrepreneurship and have an avatar, which looks a lot like me. And that's not a coincidence. We did that intentionally. And but I basically, as you just described it, because I wanted to do something for my own benefit, I wanted to be, in effect, a reseller who's doing a value added or an extended version of your platform. I already knew about Second Life. I'd already played with avatars for years. And so you and I are talking almost one to one when we started, and that means I'm a higher type of profile for an investor candidate than someone who knows nothing. And when you're doing a capital campaign, you don't get any extra points for starting with the hardest person to communicate with. You actually will find your campaign goes a lot smoother, a lot quicker if you start with someone who's totally familiar with what you're doing. And then if they get that benefit, which for me, the entrepreneur coach is becoming part of who I am, I will call it my brand. It's helped me teach entrepreneurs about entrepreneurship and raising capital. And so I get all these benefits that go beyond just, you being you. And that's cool. So that's a good point. And so go ahead, talk some more about how you would demonstrate, communicate, what you're doing.
Yeah, so one of the things that we did, as you know, we've been training the entrepreneur coach on an ongoing basis, and the more entrepreneur coach or the VR version of Carl, the more Carl talks to people, the more it is learning, but also more we learn about what kinds of questions people have, and therefore we're constantly training it and making it smarter. So so that is, so it becomes a version of you that is out there when 24/7 when you're not available. So how do we communicate that to people? I think that I've demonstrated our career coach to a number of other people, and I'm finding that the early adopters, so the more forward-looking entrepreneurs are certainly the ones who are going to adopt it first. But also, yeah, we have to point out the advantages of having technology like this. I think people at first, when they come across something that's completely new, they're reticent. They're not sure that the product will meet their needs. And certainly, if you look at the early versions of Alexa, the early versions of Siri, those companies, Apple went through a lot of pain in developing Siri, and they have thousands of people working on improving the product. But uh, but all that, so 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 we have to, so basically you have to get it out there. You have to get the product out there and demonstrate it to people. It's find people who are more willing to test it, to take maybe a little bit of leap of faith with it, and but realizing also the potential that is so, if they can get 80% of the ideal product, then that will enhance their capabilities and their position in the marketplace. So that's why I'm looking for partners like that, and it's working out. I'm finding a lot of different people out there who are interested in partnering with us, and then that brings in VCs. The VCs are now also starting to knock on our doors because they're saying, "Oh, this is interesting. What is all this activity here?"
Yeah. So you made a couple interesting points there. One is that uh, you are already developing a profile. In Motivated Money, we try to identify different groups because they have different types of benefits that they get out of the success of an organization. We create what we call a profile for that group. And so one of the profiles mentioning here is that we have um, people who are already familiar with avatars and education and all these kinds of things, and they, by definition, are already on board, or they're mostly on board, and it's easier to talk to them. So you're profiling, and that's what we do in Motivated Money. We want to talk to groups of people who already are partly educated, so we don't have to spend all the money ourselves to bring them up to speed. The other thing you mentioned is that um, as you're bringing something out like we doing now with the entrepreneur coach, you put it out there and you see how people react to it. And then based on the reaction, if they're going, I'm confused, and there's more work, we go back to the drawing board and we do more. You need to do the same thing when you're ready to make a pitch. You think you have framed your offer and your deal that you're going to present to an investor candidate. You shouldn't start day one making a pitch, asking for money as part of your capital campaign when it's still in a prototype version, when you still have a draft of your pitch. You should go to people and test it on them, just like you do in any product or service, type of study or survey, and go, here's what I'm offering. And if everybody's eyes glaze over, that you see mass confusion in front of you, you got to go back and say, this isn't ready for prime time. I need to do more with this. And I'm still struggling, even today, with what I know about avatars. And I want to make one other observation. A lot of people who think they understand the metaverse think that it's going to be like Worlds of Warcraft or one of the online gaming things where you have these massive backgrounds and deep, rich environments and all these different game playing roles and so forth. But actually, any of the AIs like the Entrepreneur Coach or Alexis or Siri are all forms of the metaverse. They're what I would consider early forms that don't have to have all these other attributes, but still provide tremendous benefits. And so this is kind of an intermediary step into the metaverse to what it can be or will be in the future. But I've had a lot of people get confused that they think that they don't know where all these avatars and these AI sit in between. So these are all very interesting points. What else are you doing to try to help tell your story?
Well, one point I want to make is also that timing is a very elusive thing, but it's very important. But as I mentioned earlier, I started this project 7 years ago, and we had an early version of knowledge avatars within the first couple of years. And then, so I built the basic core of that. I programmed it myself and whatever I could in between other projects. And, and at that time, people were not talking about AI. People were not talking about metaverse. It was just, just think of it, 5 years ago, but people, these were all, maybe concepts that people talked about in laboratories, but not in the mainstream. And today, when everybody is talking, they're all talking to their phones. They're entering. They see all the ads for VR goggles. They've seen demos by people, and we have Meta, who is spending $70 billion on metaverse. And of course that made the news. So now so all of a sudden, I'm in a position with knowledge avatars where it seems like the world has caught up, and I don't have to explain it as much as I did in the past. Now what I have to do is explain why knowledge avatars is special, or why it's different from Alexa or Siri, because people are now used to it. And of course, those companies are much larger than we are. and had the funds to educate people. And he spent a lot of money uh, doing that.
And I've already run into that. I said I was setting up the entrepreneur coach with you um, to answer questions about entrepreneurship. And somebody says, well, I heard MIT has NAI, like that was the end of the story. There's only going to be one
Yeah,
and that's it. And they're better because they're MIT. And I just started laughing at him. But it is interesting to see that transition from where the first question is, what are you talking about? To the first question is, how are you better? It's a very
right.
interesting
So now,
evolution.
yeah. So what our goal now is to make our knowledge avatars. Each knowledge avatar has its own expertise, and make them as ubiquitous as possible. Get them out there to as many different websites, and really capture market share that way. Like that is going to be a winning strategy.
It's a shift in strategy because to some degree, as long as everybody keeps going, I don't know what you're talking about. You've got all the time in the world, so to speak.
Yeah,
You really
right.
don't because you got to pay for everything and you've got
The pay
overhead
for
and
things.
all kinds of costs. But once you get to that point where there is competition, however imperfect or how, truly unrelated it may be, now there's what we call the need for speed. You move from a strategy of proving it works to proving it works better. And yes, you need more demonstrations. You need to start capturing market share, and your strategy shifts, and your story to investors shift. And it's a stronger story because it isn't like, well, do you know if it's really has any value? You go, look, they're spending $17 billion over there. So they're spending $17 billion. I think you can quit worrying about whether or not it makes sense or not. What you really need to do is evaluate it in the context of what we're doing. Are we going to be a good investment candidate for you? And there again, in motivated money, we measure it two ways. We look at the return on investment, just like a common investor would. Are you going to make more money than you invest? But the outside benefit, the interest in the success of the company, quite commonly far exceeds that. So yeah, if Emiliano, if I'd come to you a couple of years ago and said, here's $100,000, and you said, Carl, I'm going to give you a great rate of return on that, the value I'm getting from the entrepreneur coach far, far exceeds any kind of return you would have paid to me on my investment. And that's why I'm an early adopter. That's why we're doing what we're doing together, because I just see so many opportunities that keep growing on a daily basis now. As we're training up coach as the smartest entrepreneur in the world, and therefore smarter than me. But nonetheless, it's just a great opportunity. Um,
Yeah, so I think we started on which was 100, was about 50 concepts. Now it's about 130 concepts, plus the back end that gives it trillions of pieces of information that it can access. So
we're
most
going to
time.
probably have to do a special session on the coach, or actually, we're already talking about maybe bringing the coach on to Motivated Money podcast and interviewing the coach. So that's probably what we should be doing. Is we'll let the coach answer the questions himself, and we'll go through that here in the near future. That should be a lot of fun. Emiliano, thank you for being with me here this morning on the Motivated Money podcast. And once again, for everybody out there, we've got so much that you need to learn if you're going to do a capital campaign in the most elegant fashion. Elegance translates to first success. Getting turned down is not the great way to start your day every time you make a pitch. So if you're talking to someone who understands what you're talking about, who appreciates the value of where you're going, you're obviously already at a much better starting point in your pitch. And then with that, as we communicate how this works, how you monetize this, different things that go along that line, our ability to quickly and concisely demonstrate a brand new technology not only helps the investor and candidate understand the pitch, but it also conveys to you, the entrepreneur, a level of credibility. They're going, wow, if I, you know, that's all cool. That person totally gets it. They know where they're at. they understand their competitive advantage, they understand all these other things about what they're doing, then the investor candidate doesn't have to know everything. They just get comfortable that you know everything as the entrepreneur. And if you know where you're at and you understand your business model and all the things that go along with that, that gets you then to the point where you do have the credibility they're looking for. It gives them that comfort. If they get excited about where you're going with your business and your technology, that gets them to a point of making the investment decision. And that's what we're all about here on Motivated Money. So, Emiliano, thank you again for being with me this morning, and appreciate your sharing information about knowledge avatars. And I suggest anyone who wants to know anything about learning platforms or about use of avatars and getting their toe in the water on the Metaverse, go to the Knowledge Avatars website and take a look. Thank you for listening in to Motivated Money. If you like this or any other episodes, make sure to leave a rating and review of the show. We love to hear your feedback and want to make this the best possible show for you. Also, if you like this episode, make sure you share it with someone you know who is seeking to raise capital. They will appreciate learning what you now know about raising funding. I'll see you on the next episode of Motivated Money.